you to both of you. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, June, for this presentation. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is great to see so many folks here and to have this vibrant conversation and to put into action a lot of what we're hearing about the need for deliberation. My job was to facilitate a Q&A, but you all did a wonderful job with that without me, and so that job is done. I'll just introduce briefly, Hello Schwartz is the...
I just wanted to know if there's any questions about the presentation overall, too, if there's time for that.
Yeah, I do want to just make that quick note about time, which is that the event was scheduled to wrap up at 2:30. I don't want to keep anybody here who feels like they want to step out. I do know that probably those of y'all with Professor Davis might have some additional time in class before you're out, and so 5 minutes, is that what you're saying? Okay, so we can hang out for a little while, but I do understand that some of these students might have to take off because of...
Sure.
Questions, so we did have a question. And then Hello Schwartz is the archivist for the
Institute. You want to facilitate for questions?
Sure.
I just wanted to know if you could go to the Encinitas Historical Society, is that what it's called?
Yep.
Do you go there and look at all the maps?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Maybe that's just my intro.
Yeah. What else can you see there?
So I'm a historian and I'm the archivist at the Encinitas Historical Society, which is in the old schoolhouse that you saw a picture of. I also have a PhD in history from Yale and a degree in librarianship, and I'm there to make sure that the Historical Society not only preserves and digitizes everything of historical value inside that schoolhouse, but also to make it available to historical researchers, so eventually you'll be able to do a keyword search of our materials. But you'll also be able to handle physically materials that date back to the 1840s and further, because we have some older books that existed before the schoolhouse was ever built. The point then of my work at the Historical Society is always to put the history of Encinitas into larger context, as has been done here in very large context, all the way back to Mohenjo-Daro. But my point is that once we put things into larger historical context, people who come from any community around Encinitas or around California will be able to understand what materials we have of primary value inside. The schoolhouse can be used to further your own research on any other project that you might have in mind. It's rare these days to be able to put your hands onto physical materials without having a very serious set of protocols before you can ever get to touch anything. But if you come to the Historical Society, we can immediately connect you to materials that you can see how to use almost instantly, or you can figure out new ways to use that we haven't figured out. As opposed to other historical societies that think of themselves as preserving the past, we want to be thinking of what we're doing that gives people a sense of the context for the future, and thinking about the future is what we ended up with here. Last aspect of this is we have lots of room for people to come and be interns and volunteers at the Historical Society on a number of different projects. One involving public arts. We're doing an inventory of public art throughout Encinitas. Not just the murals and mosaics, but also paintings outside of people's houses, yard work, yard art, mailboxes. We are going all around Encinitas making a public inventory that will eventually have a GIS map for it and an app for it, so people can do their own tours of all the 950 works of public art in Encinitas. We are also doing a new project called Independence Days in July, because unlike most of the rest of the United States, people in Southern California, especially in the San Diego area, have experienced a multitude of Independence Days, each of which is always aspirational. When independence was declared in 1776, no one was free. Absolutely no one was free of England. And then the slaves were not part of the Independence Day anyway at that point. So it took 7 years for that Independence Day to even begin to have any kind of power. In Mexico, Independence Day is declared 11 years before Mexico gains its independence, and 14 years before it becomes a republic. So we're going to go and do a series of Independence Days for all of the communities in our area and how they have experienced these putative Independence Days, Native Americans getting supposed independence from the missions in 1833 and 34, the way in which blacks were treated even after the Emancipation Proclamation. There were 5 Emancipation Proclamations for blacks that affected blacks in San Diego, starting in 1810, believe it or not. And you can still see the battle for emancipation among blacks. It would be the same for Native Americans, it would be the same for Chinese, it would be the same for Japanese. We're doing all of those communities and talking about the many different kinds of independence days that there have been just in our area alone. If you want to help with curating that exhibit, figuring out the materials to use, figuring out the ways we can get into the community for that, great. And in this room, we have one student already who is working with us, doing interviews of the Spanish-speaking or Hispanic population in Encinitas, because we have 100 oral history interviews already done throughout Encinitas, but they are, with one exception, done with communities that are basically Anglo. And we want to reach out and do oral histories of other communities in our area. Carolyn recently did an interview with a Japanese family. So we're beginning to reach out and do these interviews, and if you want to come and do interviews for us, that would be great too, and then you would get training and also a good letter of recommendation as you move forward in whatever field you are. You will have gotten experience in professionally doing oral histories.
Thank you. Can I come in?
Thank you so much, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. So for my class, what I want you to be thinking about between now and the next time we meet is that framing effect, thinking about like how arguments are made in terms of gain or loss, identifiable victims versus statistical evidence. So what kind of narratives did we hear? What kind of stories did we hear? Versus what kind of numbers and what kind of, that kind of quantitative data did we hear in these arguments? And then thinking of those things like tragedy of the commons, social loafing, and things that we talked about before, and the things that we're going into in terms of persuasion and persuasive arguments, which you two made very persuasive arguments. Well researched, so thank you. And that's for my class. You know what we learned, how we're going to use it, and what we're still curious about. We don't have time for those cards. We are over time. I apologize for that. But if you can grab one on the way out, and then have this ready for me when we resume class on Thursday. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.